Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast, coming to you at the end of what was a very, very big week in the NFL. A lot of stuff happened on the field and a lot of stuff happened off it as well. So we will certainly be diving into that and we will do that momentarily. But before we do that, we need to do the admin, which is, as always, simple as always. Thanking you very much for joining and listening to us. If you are new, then don't forget to like, subscribe on our YouTube channel, and don't forget you can also reach out to us on our social medias. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and on Twitter we are at MRB Sports Media. So feel free to give us a follow on there. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, your support is greatly appreciated, and thank you very much for continuing to make us a part of your week. Now, let's get on with the show. Now, this is going to look very different because I did have a couple of topics that I wanted to dive into this morning when I was making the notes for the show. But today was the league owners meeting, or one of the league owners meetings. So there were a couple of headlines that came out of that. So I will dive into them first. The main one, perhaps unsurprisingly, surrounded the Tush Push, and NFL Executive Vice President Troy Vincent basically said that for the moment at least, it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. No, his comments were that it's tough to officiate, but at the end of the day, there is a team that still does it well. There is one team that does it better than everyone else, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously. Although the Minnesota Vikings showed that there may be one way of doing it when they played on Sunday. So just keep an eye out for that moving forward. But it was his next comment that sort of caught my eye. And he says, from an officiating standpoint, we're going to try to get better when someone is in the neutral zone or leaves a little early. Now, this goes back to the comments that was made by, I believe it was Dean Blandino a couple of weeks ago, where he says the only way that the tush push is going to be banned isn't from a health and safety perspective because the numbers just don't back it up at this stage. But he did say that it is becoming hard to officiate, and that is one of the main arguments with the tush push. Well, there's a variety of arguments with it, but one of them has been that it's an ugly play. I personally don't care about it. There's the health and safety. The numbers don't back that up. But one of the things that has been coming up in recent weeks, especially on TV, as has been highlighted, is the fact that there are players that are leaving early. When the guards are leaving early, the centers are lining up, way ahead of the ball to make it happen. So that is what's the illegal factor of it. We've argued that side of it. Now let's argue this side of it, the legality. So until the NFL decides that there's a good way to officiate it, then there's still going to be umming and ahhing. But by the looks of it, from an officiating standpoint at least, they're going to focus on making sure the refs do a better job at it rather than blanket just banning it because they can't officiate. So they're going to work for it. Now, what that means later on when we've seen the proposals in the NFL owners meeting and the competition committee saying that it should be banned, and there's proposals been put forward. Some teams are behind it. What that's going to mean when that comes up is going to be very interesting. And again, will it get the support? I suppose the rest of the season is going to really dictate exactly how that goes on. The other point that came out of the owners' meeting concerned the playing service, because that's something that has, again, as it happens every single season, but this seems to be the week that's been brought up, most notably after the, I will say, debacle with the Steelers, surface when they played the Cleveland Browns a couple of weeks ago, and the Steelers ground crew immediately had to basically tear the whole thing up, and then that led to conversations about should the Steelers and Pitt, the local university Pitt Panthers, should they be sharing a stadium? What's the impact of that? Whole bunch of talking points going on that has basically sparked up. And again, the consensus from the owners' meetings and from the NFL basically seems to be we're keeping it as it is, because there's always been talk about which is safer, artificial turf or grass, which service do the players prefer. The players seem to prefer grass. Again, likely from a safety standpoint, and I don't know if it really depends on how they play. If someone's able to cut better, or run their routes faster, or whatever. It's always been a safety thing rather than a who could actually play better on the surface conversation. And then also the controversy surrounding the fact that the World Cup is coming next year, and FIFA insists that games played on grass, but there's a number of stadiums around the NFL that are going to be hosting games. But no, they have to basically they are going to have to install grass fields for the summer and then take them all out. So they're saying, oh, the owners can afford to put grass there. So why not just keep the grass there? There's all these conversations, but again, by the sound of it, it looks as if nothing is going to change just yet. Because NFL executive Dawn Appointee, no idea, says the league has talked about playing surfaces, and according to them, there's not a significant difference in injury between grass and AstroTurf and artificial. So again, in their eyes, it looks as if that is going to stay for a little, can be kicked down the road. Maybe it'll be addressed next off season or whatever. But by the sounds of it, it looks as if the NFL is going to stay with things the way they are, and there's not going to be a universal change to grass fields or indeed a universal change to artificial fields either. So it looks as if the mixed match as it is going to stay this way just for a little bit longer. Right, so those were the impromptu talking points, shall we say, that came out of today whilst I was preparing the notes. So let's get on to the pre-planned ones. The first one comes as a result of the Miami Dolphins. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever watched Urinating Tree on YouTube. I have not for a while, just because I haven't really had the time with the new kid in tow. But he used to do a I don't know if he still does, but his NFL roundup of every week. And there would always be the game, the Tank Bowl, that would come up. And whenever a team, whenever two teams were playing and it looked, their season was done, he would always brand it as Tank Bowl. And I know that there was a lot of talk going into this week's game about I think it was the Firing Bowl, because with the Cleveland Browns and the Miami Dolphins, both of whom coming in with terrible records, and the insinuation being that whoever loses effectively gets fired. The Miami Dolphins lost, and the fact that it has a bit of change immediately makes me think that maybe they're going to stick with Mike McDaniel for a little bit longer, at least until the end of the season. But they have an even bigger problem when it comes to Tua Tagovailoa, and especially his contract, because it seems weird, because I do still like Tua Tagovailoa as a player. I really, really do. I think he's had incredibly bad luck with the injuries that he's had. But healthy and in the right offense, he's one of the most exciting quarterbacks to watch in the league. He's not the best, but he's certainly one of the most entertaining to watch. And again, with the right system, go back last year, the Miami Dolphins offense was flying, was absolutely brilliant. 2 years ago, absolutely flying and brilliant to watch. The defense just couldn't save them, and neither could the cold weather. But Tua Tagovailoa is basically holding the Miami Dolphins hostage. Now they have a big decision about what they are going to do. Are they going to stick with Tua Tagovailoa, or are they going to have to, and this is the note I made, are they going to have to do a Russell Wilson and just blow the whole thing up, start again, and hopefully find someone to take his contract and to get something off the books? The only issue with that is his contract is a little bit daunting for anyone who's looking to take it out. Now, this was put on Twitter by SpotRack, a very trusted source when it comes to contract information. So his contract, he has $15.3 million remaining this year. Next year, he has $55 million to be paid, $54 million of it guaranteed. In 2027, he's owed $37 million, and in 2028, he's owed $49.4. Now, as he said, Miami Dolphins are on the hook for $57 million roughly going forward. Who is going to want to take on that contract? You'd have to think maybe someone would, but for the Miami Dolphins, they are going to have to do a lot of schmoozing in order to get someone to try and take that, which is why I say maybe they're going to have to do the Russell Wilson and just cut him, and then do the whole thing where they are paying the contract, and then whoever picks him up is giving him the league minimum. Something along those lines. There's got to be something that the Miami Dolphins will do, because I think that his time with the Miami Dolphins is coming to an end. He was meant to be the man to turn the franchise around. It looked as if he would, but I just don't see how this is going to work, and especially if a new head coach is likely to come in, are they going to be a fan of Tua Tagovailoa, and are they going to be willing to hold on to him? I don't really think so. So just give a chance. Get rid of Tua Tagovailoa. Get rid of every other high earning contract you can, and just sell them for draft picks. Even if they're 6th and 7th, you can then bundle them up to turn them into 2s and 3s or whatever. But the Miami Dolphins are going to have to go through a very hard reset. And that starts with the head coach, goes to the quarterback, and goes to the players as well. This is going to be a very, very bad time for the Miami Dolphins going forward. I'll tell you one team, though, that's not having a hard time, and that is the Los Angeles Rams. And that takes us on to our second topic of the day, and something very, very intriguing. Because for their international game, they went and had the Wembley game against the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend, and they did something very, very interesting. Now, I used to cover the NFL international games, and every team had a very different strategy. And I think a lot of it depended on the coach and how laid back they were. Some teams went over early so that A, they could adjust the jet lag, and B, also so they could enjoy their time in London. Sometimes they had a lot of community events that they wanted to do, player meet and greets. Sometimes they just wanted to see the site. Some went over very early. More often than not, you'd find teams arriving on the Thursday and Friday, getting a little bit acclimated, and then leaving on the Sunday. The LA Rams did something very, very different, though. They spent the previous week, having played the Baltimore Ravens the week before, they spent their week training in Baltimore. For some reason, using the Baltimore Orioles, the baseball team's stadium, as a practice facility rather than, you'd figure that if they're going to do that, maybe some high school or something would be love to have the LA Rams stand for practice, or some college, Maryland, or trying to think about the Naval Academy. I know they're in Maryland, someone better than just makeshifting the Baltimore Orioles stadium, but whatever. That's what they did. They stayed in Baltimore for that week. Then they left on the Saturday, landed on the Saturday, played on Sunday, and then turned around straight. So basically, they had the quickest possible turnaround that you could possibly have when it came to an international game. And hey, it worked. They won 35-7. Now, I'm not saying that it was necessarily just because of their strategy when it came to when they left and when they arrived that did it for them. The LA Rams are a very good team this year. The Jaguars have some promise, but overall, they are still the Jaguars. But is that going to change how teams think about international games moving forward? Some want to go there very early. Have they just set the blueprint rather for, hey, the international games are not necessarily an annoyance, but they're an inconvenience for us. So let's just spend as little time in the country as possible. Whether they go to Brazil, or I think it might be a little bit difficult with Australia just because of how far away it is. But for the games in Europe, do they just say, hey, screw it, we're getting in and out? No, thank you. Not to say like we don't like the international fans. I'm sure they do, but we're here for business. This is our business. We're just getting in and out. I would like to see if whoever gets the international games moving forward, if they decide to go with a similar strategy. And if they do, is that going to significantly change how we feel about international games? Because that was always one of the concerns when they're talking about international games and an international franchise. One of them was, how are they going to prepare? Would you have to have basically blocks of games so that the home team, the London team, for instance, would have to play 5 weeks at home and then 5 weeks away, so they're not having to fly back and forth? Well, if a team has shown that they can fly back and forth and spend as little time there as possible, then maybe it could work. If the team's in London and then the team comes over, not saying every team could do it, but a team that does like the LA Rams did, stay on the East Coast after they just played a game on the East Coast, train that week, then go in and out. Maybe that's the way. Maybe that's the way forward, and maybe an international franchise could work. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see if anyone copies the LA Rams moving forward, and then what that does to the psyche of all the rest of the international games moving forward, and the teams that have to go there. And with that, we move on to my little roundup that we do of the NFL. Again, not every single game, but just the main talking points. And one of the main ones that has come, because again, it's part of a headline today, is what the New York Jets are going to do at quarterback. Now, with Justin Fields, again, I like Justin Fields. I think he's got some talent. I think he maybe just hasn't found the right fit yet. Again, I gave the examples last week. How many teams did Baker Mayfield have to go through before he found, you know, for his fit? Well, technically he found it in his first, but they just didn't. They decided not to go with him, but didn't really work in Carolina. Showed okay with the Rams, then finally found the Buccaneers. And I can give out, Sam Darnold again struggled with the Jets, bounced around. Now is a very, very viable option for a lot of players. So I think Justin Fields could be that. I just don't think it's going to work with the Jets because, let's face it, that is the place where quarterbacks go to die. But anyway, there is some questioning about whether or not the New York Jets are going to make a quarterback change. And by the sounds of it, they are because Rich Cimini, the ESPN reporter for the Jets, has basically said that that move is coming. Woody Johnson effectively supports it, the owner, and it's going to be Tyrod Taylor moving forward because Justin Fields has blown his opportunity with the Jets. Now, this on the surface, I don't necessarily disagree with. Again, if Justin Fields isn't working, then it isn't working. But you have to feel whether or not the Jets made the right decision going for someone like Justin Fields with a defensive minded head coach in Aaron Glenn coming over from the Lions. Did they really want to have a new head coach and a new quarterback at the same time? Would you not rather have a veteran presence, someone like Tyrod Taylor, to at least steady the ship, let him get his, let Aaron Glenn get his bearings when it comes to how to manage a quarterback and lean on a veteran player before then going for someone younger, maybe in the draft next year? I just think that was potentially, that was bad from the offset. And that is coming home to roost again. Justin Fields will probably be released. Probably going to need to go somewhere to find a new job. Off the top of my head, I'd like to think the Raiders would be a good shot for him. I think someone like Pete Carroll, having worked with Russell Wilson and similar skill set, I think he might be able to get the best out of him. So I would pick him for the Raiders, but it looks as if his time in New York is coming to a very, very swift end. Speaking of quarterbacks, I'd be remiss if I didn't offer my thoughts on Lamar Jackson and the fact that even after the Ravens had their bye week, he's still not practicing. Now, he didn't practice on Monday. It seems as if the Ravens didn't practice on Tuesday, so there wasn't at least not that I could find, there was an injury report to say he was back, whatever. If he's not back on Wednesday, when you're listening to this, so practice may have already concluded. But if he doesn't practice tomorrow, Wednesday, as I'm recording this, I would be very, very concerned because 1-5, I did say they are now going to be staring down the barrel of 1-6 because let's face it, the defense, unless something majorly changed over the course of the bye week, the defense isn't going to be able to keep up with whatever the offense can produce without Lamar Jackson. At least with Lamar, they have a chance against a very good, resurgent Bears team. If they don't have Lamar Jackson, that is 1-6. That is season over, if I'm being brutally honest. And if I'm the Ravens, I don't even bring Lamar Jackson back. There is no point bringing back Lamar Jackson at 1-6. What is he going to do? And you're only going to risk re-injuring him further. He's your franchise. Just call the season a wash. Continue to work on the defense. Make some adjustments there. But do not bring back Lamar Jackson. I think this Wednesday, Thursday is going to be very, very critical and very crucial for the Baltimore Ravens, not just this week, but as a whole for the whole season. Moving on to the Monday Night Football game. One of the games where I don't know if it was called this, but it's one of the potential NFC Championship game previews, or everyone likes to talk about this. Whenever the Chiefs play the Bills, everyone says it's an AFC, probably playoff, but AFC title game preview because you expect those teams to be at the end of the season. And for the Lions and the Buccaneers, I think you can probably put that in that bracket. Now, the Lions won I think pretty big. Because again, when it comes to the playoffs, that head-to-head record could be very crucial when it comes to, you know, battling for a 2 or a 3 seed or a 3 or 4, maybe even 1 and 2 between the Lions and the Bucks. So big win for the Lions. My main takeaway from it though is the next couple of weeks are going to be very, very crucial because Baker Mayfield was in the talk for MVP. But with the injuries to his wide receivers, especially now that Mike Evans is going to be gone for the season, this is going to be very, very telling for his MVP chances. Because if he can still get the Buccaneers to, let's say 14 and 3, 13 and 4, I think there's a very good chance he wins the MVP. But if the injuries to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, if that causes his performance levels to drop, now with Emeka Ibuka as his number one option, I feel they can do well. That's why I still think 14-3-34 is possible. But if the performances as a whole drop as a result of these players getting injured, that Baker Mayfield MVP talk, which I still think he is the number one contender for at this stage, that might start to drift away a little bit. So I'll be very interested to see if the Buccaneers offense can keep going at the rate they have been without those very, very crucial players moving forward and what it will mean for Baker Mayfield. Now on to what was arguably, I mean, not even arguably, definitely the game of the week and arguably the game of the season. I don't think you will see a better game at all this season. That is obviously the Denver Broncos and their incredible comeback against the New York Giants. Now, the thing that got me about this is that we had this incredible scoring play. The numbers, when you look at the numbers, and this probably goes to show why you shouldn't judge games just on the numbers or why they don't tell the whole story. Just goes to show just how crazy the game was. None of the position players went over 100 yards in their categories. No New York Giants player rushed for 100 yards. No New York player receiver went for 100 yards receiving. Denver rushing, nope, the highest was 81. Denver receiving, the highest was 87. Every single player went for under 100 yards. And also, the quarterbacks weren't that great either because Jackson Dart was 15 of 33. Again, it's just on numbers. He didn't do well. He played great. But 15 of 33 for 283 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception, but 15 of 33. And Bo Nix, 27 of 50, just above 50%. Again, you look at those just as that. 279 yards as well for Bo Nix. You'd think that was a bit of a... That doesn't sound entertaining to me. But absolutely brilliant comeback by the Denver Broncos. And what that is going to do to the AFC West. I said at the start of the season, this is going to be a very wild division. But even I could not have predicted what it is looking like right now. Because you have the Kansas City Chiefs coming back, on the march again, and now they've got Rashee Rice back. They are gonna keep going. Los Angeles Chargers, they are still very competitive, and the Denver Broncos are now standing alone at 5-2. There is a very good chance, especially if you look at how the rest of the AFC looks, there is a very strong chance that the AFC West sends 3 teams into the playoffs. And boy, if one of those games, in the divisional round, if they all go through, they're going to have to go head to head. That is going to be very, very intriguing television. So I'm very much looking forward to that. But again, just a bit of an aside on the New York Giants. Again, whilst I said Jackson Dart's numbers, again, on paper, his performance was a lot better. And as a result of his performance, I think you've still got to be very, very confident about what that looks like moving forward. Again, the record may not, at the end of the day, may not be too favourable in Brian Dable's favour, but if he can point to what Jackson Dart is doing and say, hey, look at what our franchise quarterback is, give me the chance to work with him, that may be just what he needs in order to save his job. And before we wrap up, I have one story away from the world of the NFL, but this week, I don't know when the last time I did this was, but it dives into the world of college football. Now, I was struck by this. It just flashed across my social media page, but I found it incredibly funny. Not necessarily the what was on hand. I'll explain into it, but more someone's reaction to it. So, in Wisconsin, There is a grocery store, gas station, My-V. I didn't do too much research, but there is that offers discounts whenever the Wisconsin Badgers football team does well. And they have a poster in the store. Now, it's no a bunch of sports teams probably have similar promotions. If I can give the example, the Pittsburgh Penguins, if they score within a certain time frame, everyone gets Big Macs from McDonald's. You know, if in the Big Mac attack, so something good happens, fans get rewarded. It happens everywhere. In this My-V, they have an offer on where if the Badgers score 28 points, then you earn 28 cents off a gallon of gas if you spend $28. Pretty good deal, especially given the cost of gas these days. If they score 35 points, you get 35 cents off if you spend $35. And if they score 42 points, you earn 42 cents off when you spend $42. It's just those prices. But I really like how, because the Wisconsin Badgers are not doing well this season, someone just put, I don't know why I found this so funny, but just decided to tweet, "Thank you, Coach Fick," at Coach Fick. So tweeting Luke Fick, the head coach of the Badgers, for yet another full week of full-priced gasoline. I don't know why, but just the wording of it was incredibly funny. Just the Wisconsin Badgers like, oh, not all this is going to impact our chance in the Big Ten or football playoffs or whether or not we're going to go to a bowl game. But the reason they're angry that the Badgers didn't score a certain amount of points was because now they've got to pay full price for a tank of petrol. I really do love that, and just levels of petty rather, that I really do appreciate. But we have run out of time because that is the end of the show. I want to thank you very much, as always, for listening. As I said at the top of the show, don't forget, if you are new, then like, subscribe, leave comment, do whatever it is that you need to do on our channels. Let's keep this thing growing. And the more support we get, the better. So our social media is at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. Feel free to follow us there. And as always, if you are a returning listener, thank you very much for once again filling half an hour of your week with my ramblings. We will be back next week, where hopefully there will be just as much to talk about, hopefully some more controversial issues, and yeah, we'll be diving into it as we always do. So until next week, take care, and as always, stay safe.